Imagine a painting so mysterious that, after nearly 600 years, art historians still argue about what it truly means. A man and a woman stand in a dimly lit room, their hands joined. A dog sits at their feet. A strange mirror reflects people we cannot see. And above them, written in bold Latin letters, is the phrase, Jan van Eyck was here. This is the Arnolfini portrait, a work that has been called a wedding certificate, a legal document, a coded message, even a spiritual contract. It is not just a painting. It is a puzzle, one that has defied explanation for centuries. To understand the mystery, we must understand the man behind it. Jan van Eyck was born around 1390 in what is now Belgium. He was a revolutionary, one of the first painters to master oil painting, creating textures, reflections, and light that seemed impossibly real. While Italian artists were obsessed with classical myths and perfect proportions, Van Eyck focused on reality, not idealized, but observed. His paintings capture the shimmer of silk, the sparkle of glass, the texture of skin. He was not just painting what he saw. He was painting how it felt to be there. The figures in the painting are believed to be Giovanni di Niccolao Arnolfini, a wealthy Italian merchant living in Bruges, and his wife, Giovanna Sinami. But even this is debated. Some scholars believe the woman is a different wife, or even that she died before the painting was completed. The Arnolfinis were part of a powerful merchant network that connected Italy, Flanders, and beyond. Their wealth and influence were immense, but their lives were also surrounded by politics, trade disputes, and family alliances. And the Arnolfini portrait may be more than just art. It may be a legal or political statement. At first glance, the painting appears simple. A man and woman in a room. But every detail is loaded with meaning. The small dog may symbolize fidelity or lust. The fruit on the windowsill could reference fertility or temptation. The single candle burning in the chandelier is often seen as the presence of God, and the convex mirror on the back wall reflects two figures, one of whom might be Van Eyck himself. None of these details are random. They are part of a visual language that only the wealthy and educated of the 15th century could fully understand. And then there's the signature. Above the mirror, in elaborate Latin script, are the words, Johannes de Eyck fuit hic. Jan van Eyck was here. This is more than a signature. It's a legal statement, the same phrase used to confirm a witness's presence in a contract. Many believe Van Eyck was acting as a witness to a marriage, a business agreement, or even a legal testimony. But others argue it's a declaration of something else entirely, that the painting itself is a witness, a silent observer of human vows, love, and mortality. For centuries, the most popular interpretation has been that this painting is a visual record of a marriage, perhaps even a legal document. The couple stands solemnly, holding hands, as if taking vows. The man raises his right hand in a gesture reminiscent of swearing an oath. In this reading, the mirror acts as a witness, reflecting two men, possibly legal officials, who would have validated the union. The signature, ink was here, may confirm the artist's presence as an official witness. If true, this would make the Arnolfini portrait one of the earliest known depictions of a secular legal ceremony in Western art. But there's a darker theory, one that changes everything. Some scholars believe the painting is not a wedding at all, but a memorial. They point to the woman's solemn expression, the absence of a wedding ring, and the extinguished candle above her side of the bed, a possible symbol of death. The fruit, once seen as a symbol of fertility, could also represent the fruits of the afterlife. If this is a memorial portrait, then Van Eyck has captured not a marriage, but a memory, a frozen moment of love and loss. Another possibility is that this is not a marriage or a memorial, but a contract. The Arnolfinis were merchants, and business alliances were often sealed with marriages or dowries. The joining of hands could symbolize a legal agreement, and the presence of witnesses, the enforcement of a deal. In this interpretation, the Arnolfini portrait becomes a document of power, a visual record of wealth, property, and status. The painting itself may have served as evidence in legal disputes over inheritance or trade. Beyond these theories, there are symbols that continue to defy explanation. The oranges on the table, a luxury in 15th century Bruges, might symbolize wealth, but also the lost paradise of Eden. The woman's green dress may indicate fertility or envy. The carved bedpost features a statue of Saint Margaret, patron saint of childbirth, yet the woman may not be pregnant. And the dog, is it loyalty or lust disguised as loyalty? Each detail opens more questions than answers, and that may be precisely what Van Eyck intended. At the heart of the mystery is the convex mirror. It reflects the couple, the room, and two additional figures standing at the door. Scholars believe one of them is Van Eyck himself, but the other, possibly a legal witness, possibly God, possibly us. The mirror is framed with tiny medallions showing the Passion of Christ, suggesting that this ordinary room is actually a sacred space. Perhaps the entire painting is not about a contract or a ceremony, but about the presence of the divine in everyday life. If that's true, then the Arnolfini portrait is more than a record. It's a theological statement, a visual proof that God sees everything. The convex mirror at the center of the Arnolfini portrait is not merely a decorative detail. It's the heart of the painting's mystery. It reflects the room from a different perspective, showing details invisible to the viewer. But most importantly, it reflects presence. Some scholars believe this mirror symbolizes God's omniscient gaze, a reminder that every oath, every contract, every action is witnessed by the divine. Others argue that it's a metaphor for the viewer's role. We are the witnesses, drawn into the scene, forced to confront the meaning of what we see. In either case, Van Eyck uses the mirror as a portal, a way to break the barrier between art and reality. In the 15th century, art was not just decoration, it was documentation. Contracts, property transfers, even marriage agreements could be recorded visually. The Arnolfini portrait may have been used as legal proof of a marriage or agreement. The Latin inscription, Jan van Eyck was here, could act as a notarized statement. The presence of witnesses, shown in the mirror, would support the document's validity. It's possible that this painting once hung not in a private home, but in a courtroom, a merchant's office, or a legal archive. From the moment it was created, the Arnolfini portrait stirred controversy. Was it a depiction of marriage, business, or death? Some critics accused Van Eyck of blurring sacred and secular boundaries, portraying a divine witness in a domestic setting. In the 19th century, art historian Joseph Archer Crow argued that the woman wasn't even pregnant, despite her appearance, suggesting that the painting was deliberately misleading. Others accused Van Eyck of inserting himself into the sacred moment, violating the neutrality expected of a witness. Yet it was precisely this ambiguity that made the painting revolutionary. Some scholars believe the painting carries political undertones. The Arnolfini family was closely tied to powerful banking and trading networks that rivaled the influence of monarchs. By commissioning a painting filled with symbols of wealth, legitimacy, and divine sanction, Giovanni Arnolfini may have been asserting his family's power, a visual proclamation of status designed to rival noble portraits. In this reading, the Arnolfini portrait is not just personal, it's political propaganda. Religion is woven into the fabric of the painting. From the single lit candle, symbolizing God's eternal presence, to the prayer beads hanging on the wall, every element points to the idea that earthly actions are observed by heaven. The room itself, often assumed to be a simple domestic interior, might represent a sacred space, a metaphorical chapel. The couple's act, whether marriage or contract, is sanctified by God's unseen presence. witnessed not just by people, but by eternity itself. In many ways, the Arnolfini portrait feels like more than a painting. It feels like a time machine. It captures a moment that may be legal, spiritual, political, or deeply personal, or all of these at once. It invites us into a world where art is not separate from life, but woven into it. Van Eyck does not simply show us a couple. He shows us a worldview, a belief system, a way of understanding the universe. And even 6 centuries later, that worldview still speaks to us. Jan van Eyck died in 1441, leaving behind a legacy that would define Northern Renaissance art. Yet, even after his death, the Arnolfini portrait continued its own mysterious journey. The painting passed through the hands of noble families, merchants, and collectors. It survived wars, revolutions, and religious upheavals. By the 19th century, it had found a permanent home in the National Gallery in London, where it remains to this day, still puzzling, still mesmerizing, still refusing to explain itself. The Arnolfini portrait changed art forever. Van Eyck's meticulous use of oil paint revolutionized technique, allowing for subtle lighting, textures, and reflections that painters had never achieved before. But it wasn't just about technique. Van Eyck redefined the purpose of painting. It was no longer just decoration or devotion. It could be a document, a legal tool, a philosophical statement, a mirror of the human condition. Every portrait, every still life, every interior painting that followed owes something to Arnolfini. Modern scholars use the Arnolfini portrait not just as a work of art, but as a historical document. It provides valuable insights into 15th century law, fashion, domestic life, and social structure. Psychologists study it as an early example of visual narrative, a work that tells a story not with words, but with space, objects, and gestures. And filmmakers and writers borrow its techniques of visual symbolism to this day. From literature to cinema, Van Eyck's influence echoes through the centuries. And yet, despite centuries of study, the Arnolfini portrait remains unresolved. Was it a wedding document, a memorial, a contract, or something else entirely? Each theory has compelling evidence and fatal flaws. Scholars cannot even agree on whether the woman was pregnant, whether the man is raising his hand in blessing or oath, or whether the mirror shows witnesses, angels, or viewers. This lack of consensus is not a failure. It's a feature, a sign that Van Eyck designed his masterpiece not to answer questions, but to ask them. Ultimately, the Arnolfini portrait is more than a painting. It's a portrait of humanity itself. Our love, our ambition, our faith, our fears. It's about the promises we make and the promises we break. It's about the presence of the sacred in the mundane and the eternal in the ordinary. It invites us to see ourselves not just as viewers, but as participants, witnesses to a story that is still being written. 6 centuries later, we still stand before this painting and wonder. We look into the mirror and see not just 2 figures from the past, but ourselves. Perhaps that was Van Eyck's greatest masterpiece, Not the pigments, not the technique, not even the symbolism, but the simple act of holding up a mirror to humanity and letting us ask, what do we see?